Welcome to Season 2 of The Aggregate, narrative coatings from around the globe. It's a broadcast that hails a treasured community of designers, architects, artists, and builders from around our world who refuse to ration their plaster passion. Amid a world of static and chaotic emotions, the show honors victories won and lessons learned. It tells the true tales rarely depicted on social media. With a neutral mind, these connective moments provide hiatus from the everyday hustle and bustle and offer a platform to recharge with our attention focused on shared skills and time-honored knowledge, ultimately curating continued creativity in everyday life. So take a second breath as New Age Artisans coats the planet and changes the standards of what it means to educate, empower, and create. I'm your host, Jeremy Mistretta, along with my man on the switches, Vincent Ryan, and welcome to our show. Hey out there, everybody. Welcome back to our show, Aggregate Season 2, Episode 14. Thanks for listening in again on this cold day here in Montana. Nothing says winter in the West like 20 below zero temperatures. Last week, we had our fun guest visit from Brian in the studio for a chat about his early career as a stonemason and his shift to the trade of plaster. We had a good laugh about the camaraderie of plaster artisans around the world and the binds that tie us together. It was a fun week here with Brian. His past life as a mason has given him incredible insight into the world of lime and the specifications needed to render mortar and plaster finishes. Offline last week, Brian and I were chatting about what it really takes to fully understand the trade of plaster. It isn't as simple as just pushing around colored mud on a wall. There's a method to the madness. I think an overall awareness of your surroundings and connectivity to the material. And this connectivity comes with keen awareness of the components that comprise your system. Too much lime and your material can crack. Too much aggregate and your materials will trowel poorly. Not enough gypsum and your render can be weak. And as more and more companies begin to send their formulas to production and contract manufacturing, more and more issues seem to arise. And as a tradesman or tradeswoman, it's imperative that you know how to back your way out of these inherent issues. And it's paramount that you have a round understanding of the processes that created your mix. As a plasterer with a degree in English literature, I can happily salute that I am not a scientist. And as my dear friend Errol Towers said to me one day, I just play one in the daytime. But thankfully, today's guest is a scientist. And not just any scientist. Her depth and breadth of understanding has far surpassed many in the field. Her studies have been praised on National Public Radio's Science Friday, in the New York Times, and her fabulous writings have been archived in the American Journal of Archaeology, to say the least. She's a wealth of knowledge on ancient Roman mortars, and I am beyond humbled to introduce her as a guest. So, ladies and gentlemen, from the University of Utah, please welcome research professor Miss Marie Jackson. How was that introduction?
It made me laugh.
Well, I'm not laughing, as I mentioned earlier. I am you were way out of my league to be talking to, so thank you for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your interest in our work. I really appreciate that.
It's so cool. It's like Brian and I were talking last week about we were at the Building Limes Forum in England, and we were chit-chatting about kind of the science and the trade and the intersection that occurs between the two of those elements. It's really, really fun. It's 20 below zero here in Montana. How's the weather down there?
Oh, we've got a little skiff of snow. I think we were all wishing that it would have been more.
Yeah. Is it
dry winter?
Cold?
No, it's not too cold here.
Wow. You got to get in the car, Ben. What has your day entailed there in Utah so far?
Oh, gosh. Well, I've been doing my usual catching up on my research projects and also digging deeply into the writings of Vitruvius from 2,000 years ago to hopefully provide some interesting responses to your questions on plasters in Rome.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Before you told me that you did a little homework, which is cool because I did an incredible amount of homework before I even talked to you the first time. As mentioning, reading articles well above my pay grade. For those that know me, as I mentioned before, I'm not a scientist. I'm a tradesman. I have a well-earned, self-proclaimed degree in job site problem solving. And shocker out there, I'm a bit of an extrovert. I'll meet anybody, anywhere, anytime to talk about just about anything, especially plaster. And one day, several years ago, my friend Heather at Highline Partners called me to tell me that due to circumstances outside of my control, I'd be meeting her friend, Molly, who was a river rat, backcountry skier, and also loved plaster and plaster art. So we met up and had some coffee. And at the meeting, I learned about her inception into the world of plaster. I learned about her family friend, Marie. And after a few badgering emails from me, Marie finally obliged to take a moment from her very busy schedule to talk to us. So thank you, of course, Molly, Pamela, and Marie. And you're currently in Utah at the moment, but you travel an incredible amount. How many years have you been a research scientist?
Oh, gosh. Well, I started graduate school in the 1970s, so that marked a few decades, for sure.
Yeah, definitely a few decades, for sure.
A few decades.
A few. Yeah. I can always tell people are like, how old are you? And I could say, well, it seems like every day when I'm scrolling through something on the phone to put my birth date, the scrolling takes longer and longer for me. So it's kind of a moniker of time. How many countries have you been to in your occupation?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I've mainly traveled in Europe for my work. So that's a number of countries for sure.
Yeah, an incredible amount over there in Europe, and also centrally located, which I really like about them all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is most of your work over in Europe, or do you go over to Asia ever?
I've visited China, which was fascinating.
Oh, wow.
To visit my daughter and also colleagues at Nanjing University, Southeast University in Nanjing. But most of my research has taken place in the United States, in Europe, and in Iceland.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Iceland. Super cool. What sort of work goes on in Iceland in the research department?
Well, this is quite interesting in terms of construction materials. We drilled a very young oceanic volcano called Surtsey that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is a remarkable window into the oceanic crust of the Earth, for which we can answer, we hope, many different questions about how basaltic rocks evolve over very short time periods. This is 50 years. This is the sustained drilling project sponsored by the International Continental Scientific Drilling Program.
Whoa. And is that through University of Utah as well?
University of Utah did an enormous amount to support the program, and what we were looking at in part was how basaltic tephra grows mineral cements and becomes a rock called tuff. Tuffra is the product of a pyroclastic eruption. Pyroclastic means fire and broken in pieces. So these are explosive eruptions of magma with water that produce large quantities of tephra, composed of glass, crystals, and pieces of rock broken through from the Earth's crust. So Surtse is a very young basaltic oceanic volcano. We've learned a huge amount from those deposits. And I will also say that in terms of Rome is built mainly on pyroclastic rocks erupted from a volcano to the north and a volcano to the south. And Romans understood those pyroclastic volcanic deposits very well.
Have you found any correlation between the two?
Absolutely. The actual composition of the magma that erupts are different. On the other hand, the deposits at Surtse and the deposits around Rome are mainly cemented with minerals called zeolites. These are very important minerals for understanding how deposits of volcanic sand become rock and therefore stabilize the ground surface and the geomorphic processes that occur in different locations.
Wow. One thing I was thinking about as you were talking, I'm always amazed at people and where they are in their life and how they got there. Obviously, you didn't just wake up one day and become a scientist. Were you curious at a young age about science?
Not really. I think I was a rather carefree spirit as a kid who liked to ride her bike and go swimming and have fun at the beach.
Yeah.
It was really when I was at university that I started actually wanting to be outdoors more. And I thought that being a geologist could help me get outdoors more.
Yeah.
And it's actually really true.
Yeah.
And then I became entirely fascinated by the world of rocks and minerals.
Fun. What was your first kind of occupation or, study as a geologist?
Well, in this kind of a perspective, it really begins with, undergraduate studies. I worked for a mining company to pay for school, and then went to graduate school to learn very specialized techniques for analyzing different types of rocks and rock structures and processes. So those years took me to some very interesting places and very interesting work doing geologic mapping and laboratory analyses.
Fun. And then with academia, where was the first college you attended?
I got my bachelor's degree at University of California at Santa Cruz. And, then I went to, this is rather unusual, but I went to the University of Nantes in France for 3 years and did a doctorat université. It's, a thesis, and I published several papers on rocks from the upper mantle of the Earth. And then I went for a PhD at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And that's the first time I came to Utah to work on the Henry Mountains. These are very diverse kinds of rocks and processes, which gave me an excellent foundation for asking process-oriented questions about different kinds of geologic environments and rock properties.
Where are the Henry Mountains?
They're in southern Utah.
Down like St. George area?
No, they're east of that. There's a large part of Utah that doesn't have any roads and towns in it, and that's part of the Henry Mountains. They were the last mountain range discovered in the continental United States in 1876, and they've just been recognized as a International Union of Geological Sciences World Heritage Site for geologic processes.
Wow. Well, no roads. It would be no surprise that I wouldn't have made it there by any means.
Well, there's dirt roads. There's dirt roads and lots of hiking.
Yeah. Are there rivers there?
No.
No rivers. Yeah. At what point in academia did it really like set in? Like this is my calling. This is my passion.
I think at the beginning, my passion was being outdoors in wild places. So that was an excellent motivation to go to some of these very remote areas and do geologic mapping. I will say that there was a turning point in my life in the 1990s where I was marginalized from science through various processes, one could say. And it was at that point that my family spent a year in Rome. And since I had worked on volcanic rocks, I became immediately fascinated by the monuments of Rome, in part because I wanted to figure out the volcanic rocks that were used as dimension stone. And this became so utterly fascinating that I took a deep dive into the world of construction materials, and I haven't left it since.
Perfect. Which brings you here today, which brought me to you, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, I think what Molly does is just wonderful, and I've had some really, really wonderful conversations with her about her work and her art.
Yeah, her art is so beautiful.
Yes.
For me, I'm steeped in the world of construction, and I love plaster because I want to do something more with my hands, and I really like walls that are painted are beautiful, but they're still like the dimension of plaster is what I really like about it all. And then I'm kind of cut from the cloth of construction. So I've really learned ways to streamline it and to bring it, to the customers as fast as we can at an efficient price so we can keep getting the projects. And it works. There's definitely an artistic flair to what we're doing, but what Molly's doing with the actual, plaster, emoting her experience on the canvas with the plaster, that's really next level stuff, which is what I love. You were mentioning construction. What do you think is your most cherished building material?
Well, I became very, very deeply fascinated by ancient Roman concrete some years ago. And we've done enormous amount of work on this material. And the more work we do, the more we recognize what a remarkably complex and sophisticated construction material Romans created that is still creating structurally functional monuments 2,000 years after they were built.
Mm-hmm. So the layman can understand. Just talk to us a little bit about science and the role that it plays with the Roman concretes.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Rome is constructed in a environment of pyroclastic rocks produced mainly by explosive eruptions. Romans understood the tough deposits of their environment, and they eventually came to have a deep understanding of the tephra components of their environment. The tuffs are rocks made out of tephra, and they described how they thought those rocks began to cement themselves. The tephra deposits are not well cemented, but contain reactive components. Romans understood those reactive components. They used lime as an activator, and over about 100 plus years, they began to refine mixtures of tephra and lime to make the mortars of very sophisticated concretes. Those are also the same materials used in plasters, but the preparation is somewhat different.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And what's the difference in preparation?
Well, the plaster has far more lime. Roman concretes mainly use lime as an activator. The tephra components are so reactive that they consume the lime and create different types of binding phases that, I'll use this word in quotes, cement the concrete. There's no cement used in Roman concrete. Plasters, in the way that we'll talk about them here, are principally lime, prepared in different ways, and intended to be used as coverings rather than binding substances.
Mm-hmm. And then you were talking a lot about the components earlier that, went into it, that came from the tuffs and the pyroclastic eruptions.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about, certain pozzolans that are added in to the lime for the reaction? Were those coming specifically from these eruptions? Yeah.
In fact, Vitruvius writes quite a bit about this. In De Architectura, the 10 books on architecture, which was written around 30 to 25 BCE. So a little more than 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, he'd be scrolling a while.
Lime plasters did indeed have reactive components in them, tephra, as well as ceramic shards in some cases. So they are complex cementitious materials from the point of view of their classification.
Got it. And then you mentioned, ceramic shards. There's kind of this common thought here that somebody could make what, quote unquote, a poor man's pozzolanic plaster, poor man's hydraulic plaster, by putting clay into the mixture. And people are going to, going to brickyards and getting kind of the fines that are coming off the bricks and putting that into the plaster. Is that kind of the same idea?
Well, it is. We have to think about clays in two different ways. Clay is actually a grain-sized fraction. It's smaller than silt. So it's a very, very fine particle size. It also means a certain type of mineral that's in the phyllosilicate class of minerals. Clay minerals are layered minerals. And certain of them are far more reactive with lime than others. In the case of Roman brick, these were not materials that were fired at very high temperature. So it would be very hard to extrapolate reactivity of a Roman ceramic shard from something that was created in a modern setting for brick.
Got it. Do you have an idea of how high the these kilns would go when they're fired?
I have not done much work on Roman brick. I have very much more focused on the volcanic components of the concretes and the building stones.
Sure. Well, I'm curious now, so I might look. I might let you know offline.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. When you think about plaster in the way in which you know it, what are your general thoughts on it as far as function and then form, interior and exterior?
Okay, so when we think about plaster in Rome, it really helps to go back to the extant texts describing construction in Rome when plaster was a very important component of the architecture. So this would be especially in the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE. So why is that important? Romans actually used 7 different types of volcanic tuffs as building stones. And Vitruvius actually described those tuffs. And he described them as soft and yielding stones around the city itself. These are porous building materials, and they were being asked to perform in an environment that goes through very large variations in relative humidity pretty much every day, which means that they can absorb water vapor during the day when temperatures are warm, and when temperatures cool off, water molecules can settle on the outsides of the stones. This means that they are very susceptible to decay, and Vitruvius wrote about this. And he said, so long as these soft stones are in sheltered places or sheltered under plaster, they will hold up and do their work. But if they are laid bare or exposed in the open air, ice and frost accumulate within them, and they crumble apart and dissolve. So you can imagine that the builders of the monuments of Rome did not want their building stones to crumble apart and dissolve. And so what Romans did is they created a dimension stone masonry that was coated with plaster. The plaster would last for certain amounts of time, and when it started to degrade, they would simply put on more plaster. So when one walks around Rome and looks at the buildings, for example, of the Republican era, for example, columns made out of tuff, one can track many layers of plaster still remaining on the surfaces of the tuff. Now, in ancient Rome, pretty much everything was covered. That's not the case now. So much of Roman masonry is susceptible to decay because it doesn't have coverings in place.
Wow, that was wild.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break, and then upon our return, I want to kind of do a deeper dive into all of these components inside Vitruvius's architecture.
Okay, great.
Ah, the secrets of plaster. So many recipes, techniques, and applications. Its diverse definitions and coveted concoctions have confused many a modern applicator. And thanks to the possessive powers of the internet, there's even more information that mystifies the waters of comprehension. Enchanted by Google Images, Hungry homeowners, architects, applicators, and designers search the tangled web, patching together some sense of structure to create textured walls, polish elements, abstract art, and relief pieces. What if the journey to success wasn't so challenging? What if all the inspiring information was integrated onto one canvas? Your wait is over. We are collecting years of practice, technique, and art into one hub, the Plaster Portal. With our streamlined system and contemporary interface, the portal protects these processes and offers applicators around the planet the opportunity of discovery, directly from the masters who preserve them. And we would like you to be part of this communal movement. So become a member today. With affordable fee of just $75, you'll become a baseline member, which provides purchasing access to New Age artisan plaster blends, as well as hand-picked content full of tips, tricks, and time-saving strategies that you can't get anywhere else. You also acquire access to our Prominent Artist Series courses, celebrating both specialty plaster finishes and industry professionals from around the world who are proud to share their time-tested practices. With the strength of our membership, we can encourage the celebration of these trades, discover new and valuable skills, and conserve the arts. Head to newageartisans.com and click the Plaster Portal link. Sign up is fast and easy. We can't wait to have you as part of our community. Before we get back to the show, here's a guest from Season 1 with a quick hello.
Hello out there, everyone in the plaster world. This is Emilia Nikolic from the Institute of Archaeology in Serbia, and you are listening to the one and only The Aggregate.
Hey, everybody. Back with Marie. Thanks so much. Thank you so much to Emilia Nikolic from Serbia. First time I met Emilia was also in England at the Building Limes Forum, and we were talking about the Danube River limes, the lines of the Danube River, and several of the very, very, very important landmarks that are there. And a lot of those are deteriorating as well. And they are doing some very solid archaeological research on those to look at deterioration and algae that is eating up the foundations of those. So, Marie, if you ever would like a friend to talk shop with that is way smarter than me as well, Emilia is your lady.
That would be fun.
I'll set you guys up for a chat. She's
Good.
Amazing. Super, super fun. Before the break, we were just, it's kind of segued into kind of plaster as a sacrificial coating for these masonry structures that Vitruvius had set. But my question is, there's plaster on the exterior of these buildings, but what is it like on the inside of the buildings with the plaster?
Good question. Vitruvius actually dedicates a large part of Chapter 7 of De Architectura to the preparation of plasters. On the preparation of plaster and on the plaster itself. And there's many pages written here on the very precise procedures to go through in terms of preparing the lime and applying it to the wall, and then the successive coats of material that are laid on that, and finally the polishing. This was a very important part of Roman construction, and I will mention that there's new monuments open now on the top of the Palatine Hill, where I saw some of those late Republican, early Imperial era plasters and their decorations for the first time a year and a half ago. It's absolutely just stupendously beautiful. So those are plaster coatings that are painted that have survived for 2,000 years.
And we're going to assume that the paint is it like a lime wash, like a lime paint?
Actually, in the same book, there's long descriptions of the different pigments to be used on the painting of the plaster.
Oh, cool. Where do you think that those pigments are harvested?
The book gives a lot of information about that. That's not something that I've researched myself, so I can't really say.
More homework for me.
There's a wonderful open source collection of ancient texts called Lacus Curtius at the University of Chicago. You can Google it, and anyone can scroll through De Architectura, either in Latin or in English, and read as much as they like. It's very fascinating reading.
Sweet. I love that. Also will be in the show notes for sure. Why do you think Vitruvius was so important to Roman architecture?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think that the classicists believe that there were many texts describing the principles and practices of Roman construction. Vitruvius's De Architectura is one of the few complete texts that has survived. He writes about the details of materials, and he also projects a geotechnical expertise. That's actually a very remarkable thing. He described the diverse material characteristics of Roman building stones, processes of absorption of water, liquid water, processes of adsorption of water vapor, applications of stuccos, the distribution of loads within structures, and many, many different topics in the world of concrete materials. Was this a construction manual? No. Instead, it was, in some aspects, a translation of principles of natural science as viewed by Romans, but also with some intent to bring this to a scientific method, a term that Vitruvius called scientia, or knowledge. So Vitruvius's books must be read with a very open mind to be able to understand the diversity of his concepts. In addition, when we look at current translations, they're usually made by classicists, and they're very good. But since the classicists are not engineers or geoscientists, they miss a lot of nuance. So what we have done when we did this many years ago is translate certain parts of De Architectura in a very literal, almost algebraic fashion to begin to get a deeper understanding of how he viewed materials and building.
Yeah, it seems like he had so many tools in his tool belt, architecture, designer, structural engineer. It's not something that normally just falls in your lap, especially thousands and thousands of years ago.
Yeah. He was very, very smart and very reflective.
Mm-hmm. What do you think has been drawn off of him in the world of architecture and the world of mortars and the world of plasters?
Well, that's really interesting because there's been a fascination with Roman building materials since the Renaissance, and there's many writings about these materials and Vitruvius's descriptions of them. What we have done is to make materials measurements in terms of properties and characteristics, so we can place his empirical observations in terms of, I'll put this in quotes, modern engineering science. So in doing that, I am now returning to translations that we made many years ago, and with some new geotechnical testing that we've been doing over the past year or two, getting entirely new insights into the nuances of Vitruvius's writings. So there's a lot here still to be learned.
I just realized, too, that you likely have a degree or a very solid understanding of the Latin language.
Actually, I don't. But I work with people who do. So it's a very collaborative effort.
Got it.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. You, I would assume you have somewhat of a round understanding of it a little bit, certain.
Oh, yes. But Latin is a very complicated language to decipher because a single word can have many different meanings. And the way that the words are aligned in the sentence doesn't really matter, but how they are modified does.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, because we are relying on the transcriptions and transcriptions of transcriptions to understand Vitruvius's writings, even on plaster, we have to be very careful to really understand which words are modifying which and how the nuances of the sentence fit together.
Yeah. I loved when you used the term reflective. I was kind of searching for it. I'm like, what's the term? Like he's feeling it.
Oh, speaking of reflective, there's something that the world of plaster might be interesting. This is from Vitruvius's book 7, chapter 3. I'm going to read it very briefly. As a silver mirror made from a thin plate reflects the image confusedly and weakly, while from a thick solid plate it takes a high polish and reflects the image brilliantly and strongly, so plastering, when thin in substance, not only cracks but soon decays. On the contrary, that which is well covered with plaster and closely laid on when well polished, not only shines, but reflects to the spectators the images falling on it.
Wow. I love that.
It gives you a bit of a picture of the workmanship that was required in those interior buildings and the polishing that finished the surface.
Mm-hmm. And then, it also gives you a kind of a look into the depth of what the materials were. Because from my perspective, in the world of plaster, if you have something really thin and you want to polish it, there's no real suction that's occurring. The water that, is integrated into the mix is not being pulled back to the bed surface correctly. It has nowhere to go. So it in turn pulls right to the surface and then cracks. The plaster will crack.
Well, Vitruvius had something specific to say about that.
Oh, do tell.
And this is again in chapter 3 of book 7. When only one coat of sand and one of marble dust are used, the plaster is easily broken from its thinness and is not, on that account, capable of acquiring a brilliant appearance.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more with Vitruvius. He's right, even to this day. He's right. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of folks will say, "Oh, can you just do it in one coat?" I mean, you can do it in one coat, but it's not going to have the depth and dimension that a 2 to 3 or 4 coat plaster will have. And if we are going to do one coat, what we'll do is out of one mix, we'll strike up the first coat, kind of the scratch coat. We'll allow that to tack, and then we'll double back right out of the same batch. But it's not the same. It doesn't have the same depth, doesn't have the same dimension. And then in turn, as you were saying, it's brittle. Doesn't have that suction.
Right. In that same chapter 3, there's many passages describing the layers of material that need to be laid on the wall and how they are laid on and how they are to be worked and rubbed and polished. In fact, he's requiring a first coat that's roughly laid on and then 3 sand coats. That's actually a pozzolanic mixture with finely ground tephra in it. Thus, with 3 sand coats and the same number of marble dust coats, the wall will be rendered solid and not liable to cracks or other defects.
Yeah, and this was obviously well before any sort of other additives were added in there. Just pure minerals and efficient layering of them, which is amazing. I mean, you can get away with it now with, old school horsehair, tensile strength. Now everyone's throwing, synthetic mesh in there to not make it crack. But it's interesting to look back in history and see how it was done.
He does give very specific information about the lime and the importance of having it, in his quotes, tempered a long time before it is wanted for use, so that if any of it is not burnt enough, the length of time employed in slaking may bring the whole mass to the same consistence. And he does really go into detail on that, the importance of aging the lime paste for a substantial amount of time before application. And I think this also applies to the aging of the lime tephra sand paste as well.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to assume that they're slaking quicklime?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. There's many ways to slake quicklime, as I'm sure you know, and many, many ways to prepare mixtures of lime and sand.
Absolutely. Do you know of, in your studies, have you learned about ways in which they slaked it there during that time?
We do a lot of that ourselves. We work with quicklime. We are making concretes, not plasters.
Mm-hmm. And how do you guys do it?
Well, we've done it in different ways. I can't really go into the details of it because it's sort of proprietary information.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that Romans were exceedingly clever in terms of how they, in particular, slaked quicklime for Roman marine concrete structures.
Got it. Clever. We'll keep it mysterious.
Very clever.
Yeah,
clever.
I like it. I like it.
Yes.
I won't dig anymore.
Okay.
When you're visiting these structures in Rome and you see this plaster and the plaster is effaced over thousands of years, I'm just curious, when you're visiting these buildings, these structures, and you're seeing the plaster has effaced, and I'm sure that's, kind of marks of time that have occurred throughout it, and you can see the layers. How true do you think, from your perspective, the newer contemporary formulas are compared to the original formulas of antiquity?
Oh, gosh. That may be a question that you can answer better.
More homework.
First of all, most wall surfaces in Rome do not have coverings. It's important to note that as Roman construction moved into the imperial era, the monuments often had sheets of rock as protective coatings, marble or decorative stone. And a lot of that was removed over time. The stucco that remains is often in just little areas in outdoor monuments, just places where it is managed to stay on. So I think that probably more work could be done to look at variations in plaster compositions over time. However, what we know about Roman materials is they mainly are composed of the lime activator, CaO, and this reactive volcanic sand or dust. That sand, arena fossice, which is from the area of Rome, or Pulvis puteolanus from the area near Naples, is so reactive with lime that it grows really specific binding materials that hold the plaster together. It would be almost impossible to find sand with those reactive characteristics in the Western United States volcanics. There are some substitutes, but because they're not as reactive as the Roman materials, different additives would have to be used, I would guess.
Mm-hmm. And I know that when you are adding certain pozzolans to lime, there are certain amounts of pot life that occur, and some mixes are very hydraulic. Some mixes are, for lack of a better term, kind of feebly hydraulic. What do you think, from your scientific background, how hydraulic were the mixtures, and what do you think, if you were to imagine, would be like a pot life of a mixture?
Well, first of all, we have to make inquiries into the lime. Vitruvius was specifically referring to a quicklime that was, we've measured this, more than 95% calcium oxide. Many limes have other constituents in them, whether it's silica or clay minerals. So the lime itself is a factor in the preparation of the plaster.
Completely understood. And I've noticed that too. You know, here there's certain amounts of lime, or certain types of lime that'll come from different places. And you can mix that particular lime in with a similar aggregate, and you're going to get a very, very different reaction. Very different. How about atmospheric conditions? You mentioned that earlier as well. How do those affect the plasters in Greece?
If we think about the environment of Rome, we have to imagine this environment that has really humid, warm summers and rainy, cool winters. There's really not very many freezing days in the city, so that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that the temperature variation during the day is quite substantial, so that the relative humidity, that means how much moisture can the air carry, varies from about 85%, so it's almost saturated in the morning, to like 60 to 70% at midday as temperatures rise. So that means that during the day, when the air is warm and the building stone is warm, water vapor penetrates into these very porous stones and actually begins to permeate through the stone material. And then at night, as the temperatures decrease, the water molecules released from the cooling air just settles on the building stone surfaces. So every day, the surface of that porous volcanic tough masonry is having to accommodate a lot of movement of vapor or liquid water into the exterior of the building. And if you walk around Rome, you can see that some building stones have like a convex outward shape that just shows how the stone is disaggregated and erodes up to the corners of the stones, in part through, sun and wind evaporation as well. So that the excavation of the Roman monuments a century ago actually has put them into a lot of stress that they weren't experiencing when they were actually buried underneath the stratigraphy of anthropomorphic structures in Rome. So those structures that are so beautiful, like the Forum of Caesar, were never meant to be exposed without stucco coatings on them. So we have a process of active decay and disaggregation going on in the building stones that Vitruvius would probably find extremely alarming.
Yeah, rolling in its grave, I'm sure. Didn't design it like this, people.
Yeah.
From where you sit with all of your knowledge in the world of sciences and Roman architecture, what are your general thoughts of plaster coatings in North America?
I think the way that we build today, plaster coatings would probably be more concerned with decorative surfaces than protective surfaces on the exteriors of buildings, at least in recent construction. So it's really, I think there's a collection of building standards that require low porosity building materials. So the protective function of stucco is not as mandatory as it was in ancient Roman construction. That being said, I think some of the beauty of internal plasters that we can see when we visit the city of Rome are certainly worthy of inspiration for modern construction.
100% agree. And we were mentioning earlier, it's 20 below zero. So I really try and stay out of exterior work for a lot of reasons, especially here. It's a giant insurance liability, especially with the ebb and flow of moisture, as you were discussing. And when water enters a exterior render, freezes and expands, it literally blows the stucco right off of the walls. Interior and exterior, and there has to be a tremendous amount of defensive architecture in place to be able to protect those surfaces. And it seems as if they're going up, especially here, strictly due to form and not function.
Oh, wow.
In my take, in the Northwest especially.
Wow.
And a lot of it, I think for block construction, coatings are beautiful, but when we see things that kind of plaster that goes down to grade in these freeze-thaw climates, I tend to get a little concerned that things aren't going to pan out.
Yeah.
With all your travels around the world, what do you think is the most beautiful form of plaster that you've seen and the most useful form of plaster?
Well, I think I'm entirely biased to Roman stone masonry. This is a style of building that lasted for centuries, from the Etruscans through certainly the 1st century CE, and the building stones that Vitruvius described as soft and yielding. We translate yielding as having very low compressive strength, are still largely functional because of the plaster coatings that were put on them to protect them from environmental decay, both on the exterior as renders and then as these very beautiful artistic depictions of Roman motifs and art on the interiors.
Have you been to Egypt?
No.
I'd like to go there. That's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just would love to see, all of these limestone blocks stacked and then see how they were coated interior, the interior portions and the exterior. I would just be fascinated by it because you can just learn so much from thousands of years of construction and understand how they were done, and then also understand that the way in which we're doing things now is, I think, strictly built on commerce as opposed to homage to correct way of building from my perspective.
Well, I think you have a very unique perspective, and I think it's really, really important that you are giving plaster the attention and care that it deserves to be used in both internal and exterior settings. It's a remarkable material, and it may not be designed for minus 20 below, but there are a lot of places in the world where it has the potential to be an important material.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. And then the term plaster is just so wide as the myriad of terms surrounding around it. But thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today. And thank you for giving us a look into the science of plaster. It's been beyond rewarding to talk to you.
Oh, it was a lot of fun, Jeremy. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, and I'm going to do my homework. And when I do it, I will report back to you on these things, I promise.
Oh, good. I'm interested to hear what you find.
Okay, we'll let you know.
Good.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll talk real soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Please don't forget to listen in next week as we link up with Jethro Marsh of England's Natural Plaster Company. A heritage plasterer by trade, he began working at a young age in Bristol as a high-end installer, earning his strokes in some of Europe's finest homes. He's uncovered hidden architectural treasures, worked on structures that are hundreds of years old, and has dedicated his life to the preservation and restoration of England's elite structures. We'll chat Roman mortars, cornice running, and familial ties. Until next time, cheers!